Hey guys, welcome to the Warrior PvP guide. I've been sort of re-recording and sort of adding different things over the last couple of days, and for a lot of people I talk to, yeah, it's been delayed quite a bit as I've tried to get as much footage of different things and tried to work out what I should really put into this. So the idea with this guide is it's a little bit different from the stock standard, PvP guide. I had a look through a few of them, and it feels like they focus far too much on like talents, conduits, um, all this kind of stuff, right? And legendaries, like because it's Shadowlands, it's new. But what I really wanted to focus on today was really looking at, I guess, the core of your role as a warrior, what you're really trying to do in most games, and I guess looking at more of the playstyle. I will still cover talents, gear, legendary, conduit stuff really quickly, but I'm only covering it for like 2 minutes, and I'm doing it all at once. Mainly so you guys can stop and I guess take screenshots or like take photos of whatever I put up. And as of today, it's I think the 27th of December here, so um, Shadowlands patch 1, season 1. So a lot of the stuff I might say could literally change on like Wednesday. Apologies with some of the recording. Um, I don't really have a good setup. I've never really done the YouTube or videos before, but considering that a lot of people are asking me similar types of questions, I thought, we may as well cover it. So that kind of covers all that intro. So I really want to quickly cover the stuff that's in pretty much every single guide. This is the talent build I run, right? I don't really ever change this. Some warriors do, they change between Dreadnought and Anger Management if you don't want to accidentally cleave. You might change between like Massacre and Rend if you're versing a cleave. But I feel like these are pretty stock standard as of today. Um, in terms of PvP talents, obviously you have a lot of utility here. You can really do a lot with your PvP talents. Sharpened Blade, I think, has become less of a requisite as it used to. Beforehand, Sharpened Blade literally was like a must. You must always have Sharpened Blade. But nowadays, I feel like, yeah, you're a bit flexible with whether you're on it or not. It's really up to you, and you got to kind of make the decision there based on the comp you're fighting. For instance, if I'm versing RMP, I don't really feel like I need it. Whereas if I'm versing Boomkin, Holy Pally, both of those things get huge value out of Sharpen Blade, right? Because I can sharpen his frenzied regen, I can sharpen his big heal, all this kind of stuff, right? So you got to play that by ear, and it's something that I can't really explain all the different scenarios when to run and when not to run Sharpen. I run War Banner, and generally War Banner and Overwatch are interchangeable for me. Um, the only thing I'll flag about Overwatch is you probably shouldn't run it when you need to intervene to stop damage. I find that Overwatch is really good against double caster, where your intervene's only used for utility, either to stop you from getting polyed, or two, to stop like polys with Overwatch, right? Because you can reflect them. Um, Disarm obviously is, you can flip this out for disarm as well if you have to run sharpen. This is really good against rogues, melees, rats. Just melee in general, you should probably run disarm, except Windwalker monks. The rest of them are pretty straightforward. I really wouldn't recommend duel anymore. I feel like it's just too slow, like 1 minute and it stops damage by 8 seconds. Like there's so many other better things out there right now. But I feel like if the meta slows down a bit, having duel for every combust could be extremely strong because combust does so much damage right now. So and I almost always run Master and Commander in threes. In twos, maybe I switch it out if I don't really feel like we need it, but in threes, I always run it. So, gearing, obviously, Prio Haste Verse, but, just Prio Verse in general. If there's pieces that have, more haste than you need, sorry, that have crit verse or something, but it's like 20 eye levels or 10 eye levels higher, then run that, of course. But generally, you just got to play it by ear. If it's a huge stat upgrade, then run that. Even if it has a bit of crit or verse. I think the prio generally is haste to 20%, then mastery, then crit, with verse being the most important stat. And run the two PvP trinkets because they give you 40% extra damage from the healing benefit of versatility. Which, as you can see, as the season goes on, this is only like week 3 of the season, and I already have 25% verse because of how much verse PvP gear gives. So I can imagine by the end of the season, this might look like 30, 31, 32%, which means that you're getting 12% extra damage. I think conduits, I run Kyrian. I typically run Model Combo or Crash the Ramparts, either or. I feel like it's not too important. For my Finesse Conduit, I run Safeguard, and I haven't really found the need to run an Endurance Conduit here. Like, I feel like our Endurance Conduits are kind of bad. I haven't really seen any really good ones except Stalwart Guardian, which you have to get anyway because it goes through here. And I'd probably run the Potency here and then the Finesse again. So it would be kind of like going that. And I'd probably look at Inspiring Presence and Safeguard as being the two best Finesse conduits. Potency, Piercing Verdict's good. Crash Ramparts is good. Mortal Combo is good. The rest are kind of meh. Cool. So now I really want to get into gameplay. I want to split gameplay into two separate sort of ideas, right? The first idea is looking at what your role is in the arena, right? And I guess how you should be playing, what you should really be looking out for, and then how to review like your own gameplay based on this, right? So to really summarize succinctly what warriors do, regardless of patch, regardless of expansion, is they're typically very, very hard to peel, right? Because we have all these different tools to break out of fears, to break out of incaps, to charge, blade storm, all this stuff. And we have like leap, intervene, charge. So much mobility, right? Do insane amounts of damage, prefer like usually cleave, and to prevent and disrupt the enemy's go, right? So there's a number of ways to think about this, but I want to go through the first one. So the first one is generally being very hard to peel, being annoying, and sticking onto a target and doing big damage. I kind of lump that into each other, right? Because if you're really easy to peel, then you're not going to be doing big damage. Um, and, it's just a matter of like repositioning the way you think. Because sometimes people play Warrior really weirdly, especially at lower ratings. It's actually quite it's a pretty simple class. Like there's not too much to go. So generally, your main mission is to open hard, get your cooldowns, like your offensive cooldowns on cooldown as soon as possible. The reason for that is you have very short offensive cooldowns, right? Spear is a minute. Colossal Smash is 45 seconds. Blade Storm's like a minute and a half. Avatar's like a minute and a half. So pretty much you can force defensive cooldowns instantly with any type of CC on the healer, right? Um, so what you want to be doing is getting those cooldowns out of the way straight away. You want to be making sure you're looking for sweeping strikes opportunities and generally just doing your rotation really well. It sounds really stupid, but like a lot of the times, what I see warriors do is they'll press their buttons badly. Um, like they just won't understand the rotation that's going on. And I'm kind of going to show you a little bit of an example of this. Like, I don't. It obviously changes, right? Because you might be versing different stuff. But I don't think this warrior that I was versing was running the execute proc, or he just didn't have uptime, right? This is a twos match. It's a mirror, right? Which is why I'm using this as an example. We hit Mortal Strike the same amount of times. I think we literally got the exact same amount of crits as well. But what his issue was generally not being able to hit those execute procs, right? And obviously I got a bit luckier with what I'm hitting, but I did so much more damage with my Spirit Bastion, my Overpower, and even melee, right? And if you compare these two, you can sort of see how much more damage I did with everything. And a lot of this, even though we cast it at the same amount of times, might be me using my offensive cooldowns better and more often, so my Mortal Strike is just hitting more, right, on average. Um, I'm not hitting Slam as much because I'm using Ignore Pains, so my healer doesn't have to heal me as much. Our Blade Storm damage is pretty similar, but it seems to be like this execute damage, which really makes a big difference. Because obviously, like we won, right? But still, two executes is like far too low because you usually get way more procs, and it was quite a long game. Which is sort of what I'm saying is like get used to your rotation, right? And you can learn your rotation by literally looking up any serious PvE guide, it's pretty much the same thing, minus a couple spells. You get your Mortal Strike on cooldown. You can use your overpowers and they proc, and as soon as possible, put those on cooldown. Slam is a filler and just execute when it procs straight away. Very very simple rotation, right? The hard thing I think people do is they might hit slam too many times and then not have enough rage for Mortal Strike, or maybe they're not paying attention. They're not getting Mortal Strike on cooldown. They're not hitting overpower enough. Um, and a lot of the times, I actually find that I like to just throw the ignore pain instead of the slam because I feel like ignore pain, just having that on cooldown all the time, just prevents a lot of general damage. So that's I think the first idea, and the spells you really want to focus on here is like how I would say the best way to improve as a warrior is one, get really really good at your rotation. Two, get an idea about if you're using your mobility correctly, right? So, are you charging randomly? Are you leaping like I see a lot of warriors at lower ratings do like this type of leap when like it doesn't really save you that much time to just walk over. And obviously like there's instances where that leap is fine, but a lot of the times like leap is a pretty long cooldown. It's 45 seconds. I think charge is like 30 seconds as well, or 18 seconds, 20 seconds, right? So both things are actually on pretty big cooldowns. So if you waste them, you don't really have an easy way to get back to your target. You sort of have to waddle while you're getting slowed, which is pretty much impossible, right? They can just keep running. So you need to think about one, how am I using my mobility? How am I using my movement abilities? And a good way to do that is just record your gameplay over something like Streamlabs, Streamlabs OBS, Twitch. If you stream or something, you don't have to stream to anyone, but you can review your VODs. And you need to see in games where you feel like, hey, I feel like I never have any buttons to chase this guy. You need to kind of look at your gameplay and say, okay, cool, I charged here. I didn't really need to because he had a blink, right? How you should use your mobility, your movement cooldowns, is relative to the thing you're versing, right? If I'm versing a Shadow Priest, I actually don't mind just charging him, getting that extra rage to pump, right? Because he doesn't have much mobility after that. If I'm versing a Mage, I don't. If the second I charge, he's got a blink, and if I use my leap, he can use a blink or get gripped or get any type of frost over me. He can stop me, right? And it makes it incredibly hard to stay on top of him. But if I see him use his two blinks to get to my healer, then I can charge for free, right? I'm not too scared. He might Nova me, but I can just avatar. So you need to kind of use your mobility relative to the situation, which is why in a lot of this guide, I can't just say, if it's a mage, you run up to him, because maybe there's instances where charge would have been better, right? But generally, you want to look at what you can do to just slow them and walk. You want to like use your Stormbolt as a gap closer as well. Um, if they're like this distance away, if you Stormbolt and they're running, you can still catch up to them. I see a lot of people Stormbolt and then charge like a really small amount of distance. Think about how you can use your spells and then synergize with your team as well, right? So they can help you get to the target, which means calling for Frost Nova dispels if they need to happen, etc., etc. The next thing I want to talk about, and something that I think I need to flag when I'm thinking about mobility and movement, is avatar usage, right? Avatar removes all your roots and snares, which means that as much as it helps you deal increased damage on your go, it might be better, like against something like a mage or a boomkin or a shaman, right, to just wait till they root you, then use the avatar to one, get more damage, but two, break the root for free. Which means your healer can hold their dispel or use their dispel on a different button, right? Or if you're behind a pillar hitting a shaman, you're able to stay on top of him, right? So, and similar thing with a mage. A lot of the times, a mage will like frost nova you like here, and then like just walk. And if you just avatar and move over to him, there's not really much things like he can't do that for too long, right? And then you have blade storm for the next one. So you need to look at your abilities and think about how you're going to break the root, right? And if you play gnome as well, you have another button there. So that kind of covers the idea of like sort of being sticky, hard to kill, and staying on a target. To be honest, if you are able to do that successfully, I honestly think you can go up really high. Um, Even if you've never played a warrior before, if you just get really good at doing damage and that's all you're good at, like you're just good at doing damage and staying on a target, generally that'll get you pretty high. It'll get you pretty far. But the next thing you want to think about is being hard to kill, right? So warriors have probably the strongest defensive in the game, right? With defensive stance, literally on demand, barely any cooldown, and it reduces all damage you take, right? You pair that with the fact that you play armor, right? Um, you have like an armor stat which reduces physical damage as well, and you have ignore pain. You have where is it? Rallying cry, which gives you more health. You have spell reflect, and you have file if you play Kyrian, right? You have all these different abilities to get out of a sticky situation with intervene and leap, and you're just generally hard to kill. Like focusing a warrior, it takes a lot of time. It requires a really big CC chain, and it also requires you not to press your buttons because now you have this defensive on top of that, which is parry, right? Which stops 30% of damage, which stacks for your D stance, which means you take 50% less, right? And it gives you a 100% chance to parry, which is nuts. So um, you need to like really look at when you should be going into D stance and when you should be going into B stance, right? And this is a thing, like a lot of warriors do a lot, is they camp D stance the whole game or they camp B stance, either or. They don't switch, right? A lot of the skill cap, in my opinion, at high ratings is knowing when you how to min max B stance and D stance usage, right? So if you're the target in a game, you might be hitting your D stance way more often, right? You might really just camp distance if you're going to win through dampening, right? May as well make you efficient to heal. But a lot of the times, if your healer has you, he's not in CC or he's on DR from CC, or if you're on stun DR, then you don't really need to sit in distance the whole game unless you're versing something like Ret Windwalker, which is constantly putting you under a huge amount of pressure, right? So, um, generally, what I would say and try and consider is look at the situation and try and think, okay, do I need to be in D stance or B stance here? Identify situations where you should have been in B stance or where you should have been in D stance. A lot of this is just reviewing your own gameplay and just adapting and learning from it. And how I'm trying to put it to you now is instead of telling you exactly what to do, um, I can't just look at your gameplay and tell you. Like I could if I was watching a game, sorry, but I can't look at all of your gameplay and just say, okay, you should have been B stance here, D stance here. You need to sort of go through that process yourself. Um, and like, let's say you're dying in a lot of games. Well, then the issue is probably your D stance and cooldown usage, right? Let's say you're not able to kill anything every game, or your damage is far lower than the other warriors. It probably means you're sitting in D stance too long or your uptime's bad, right? So you need to sort of make a habit of recording games and looking at them. If I think if you want to improve very quickly on a warrior. So the third and final thing, which will sort of cap out this first section of the video, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle gameplay footage from twos and threes, which I'll have in like a bit of a series, which will sort of build on top of what I'm saying here. Um, and this is peeling and being disruptive on the enemy team's go. So a lot of the times, as I mentioned in the last part, warriors are not a favorable target to go, right? Because they're very hard to kill. Which means that you're not usually the kill target, but that means you have to peel your team. And this is what I think a lot of warriors struggle with in like that 2.1, 2.2 bracket, right? They're very, very good at offense. Usually they can pump damage, but they don't peel for their team. And this is kind of why Warriors in Shadowlands Season 1, at least early season, are so broken. Because you have so many peels. You've got Banner, right, which reduces all incoming crowd controls by 50%. And that lasts 15 seconds, right? So if you place that in an interesting spot that might be hard to kill on their go, one, even if they do kill it, they have to go and find it and then kill it, right? You have what's it called? Piercing Howl, which just slows everyone, which is a pretty strong slow, just 30-second cooldown. It slows everyone for 70%. And you have Intervene, right? Where is that? You have Intervene and you have Fear, right? Intervene means that you take all their damage, like all the melee and range attacks against the target, which frankly is busted. Like that is so strong because every time you have a go, um, and you're versing anything with melee, like anytime they like poly your healer and you hit intervene straight away, you're immediately negating so much of that go, right? Um, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to take any damage because I feel like there's a lot of magical effects and AoE and all this kind of stuff, right? But it does mean that you're absorbing the majority of this like melee and like 30, 40, 50% or even like 80% sometimes of the damage. What you have to be worried about there is that against a really, really high octane cleave, think about something like Windwalker Warrior or Windwalker DK, right? You're probably going to die really quickly inside that. So you need to think about, cool, I'm at 100% HP, and I just intervened when there's like clones from the Windwalker and the Frost DK is pumping as well, and like there's all this damage coming out on everyone, right? You probably need to distance, ignore pain, and even file if you need so you don't die and like create more pressure um, on the whole team because everyone's going to be getting cleaved at that point. So intervene, insane spell. I would say try and get in the habit of using it to stop damage, but also it can be used as a peel for yourself, right? And a way to reposition yourself back. So use this really wisely because it can be insanely powerful. Okay, so the other thing is fear, right? So a lot of people look at fear as purely an offensive cooldown. If you think about it, they're getting feared for 8 seconds, right? And it's undispellable except for Tremor Totem and Bop, right? Which are pretty like Tremor might be pretty common if you're versing a lot of shamans, and especially when you verse like double shaman, it might be hard to get both of them. But even when you're versing shamans, just being able to peel the shaman and take him out of the game for 8 seconds is huge on your goes, right? So you need to think about this in an offensive and defensive light. For instance, when you're versing an enhancement shaman and he pops Ascendance, you can just hit fear straight away, right? And there's no way he can get out of that except for Trinket Tremoring, right? Because a lot of his team's probably in that same fear. So they might want to hit, there's value for him to get out of that fear, but you instantly have his Trinket, which means he's in a worse defensive light. Um, which you should think about definitely using this way more defensive, especially if you're playing a cleave. That you seem to just be killing everything anyway, or maybe you have a priest on your team which is already using their fear offensively, right? Because this one's undispellable, which is a huge thing. Um, and in terms of other peels, you have even stuff like charge, that root for 1 second helps, hamstringing all the targets, um, rally. You have Spirit Bastion, which can be used defensively. You have also the ability to counter pressure with like a huge Blade Storm go on both targets, against a melee cleave. You have War Banner, which can be used to stop stuns, and you have Stormbolt, right? Stormbolt's an amazing stun. It's ranged, it's undispellable, it lasts 4 seconds, and only has a 30-second cooldown. So this can be like almost all of your spells on a warrior can be used offensively and defensively, which is why I think warriors are such can be played so differently by different people. Because some people might look at this purely offensively, and some people might look at it purely defensively, right? So, in essence, I think the things I want to cap off this video with is if you want to improve considerably on your warrior, think about the stuff I've said, think about whether you're putting it in place. Obviously, fix your gear, conduits, all that crap, right? You need to do that. That's the building blocks, that's your foundation, right? But you should really be thinking about more of your gameplay and whether you're playing at the same level as other people. Is your damage good enough? Are you working on your gear consistently? And are you peeling goes? Are you disrupting goes? Or are you just kind of freaking out and doing damage? Right? Are you using your defensives properly, right? All this stuff sounds really easy when I explain it on this type of video, but when you're in the heat of the moment, pressing the right button, pressing too many buttons, it's really hard to get a feel for. And I think one of the biggest problems I have is when I get focused, I press way too many buttons, and I can identify that through the VODs, right? So I would say the first thing you should try and do is record all your serious arena queue sessions. You don't have to watch the whole thing, right? That's way too long, but maybe try and make a note when you had games that you felt like were really, really hard or really, really easy. Think about what you did well and then think about what you didn't do too well. And then try and improve on those each queue session, which is kind of basic advice for anyone who wants to improve an arena. But specifically for Warrior, I'm hoping this gives you a good idea of what's bad and what's good. And the next few videos will kind of put that into place. I'll go through some twos, a low rating. I'll try and see if I can have any high rating twos footage. And then I'll go over some higher rated threes around this like 25-50 bracket, which is in sort of the top 300. Um, and we'll go over that as well. And I'll show you sort of how even small mistakes from their team can lead you to a win, and how small mistakes from you can throw a game. So we'll go over that. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any VODs you want me to review, if you have anything, I get a lot of warriors who message me and they say they want to have a conversation, but honestly, that's going to take a little too long. Um, Check out the stream. Let me know. I've linked it here too. And I'm happy to review your VODs if you've got any, right? And sort of in the light of what I've just said. All right. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.